Good morning. I'm Geri Allyn, a partner at Daversa Partners and one of the founders of the firm's Frontier Tech practice. This morning, I'm in sunny Alameda, California at the Saildrone headquarters with CFO Barak Ben-Gal. Good morning, Barak.
Good morning, Geri. Welcome.
Thank you for having me. So let's start with something fun and easy. What exactly is a saildrone?
Well, you can see one of them right behind me. They've been called autonomous surfboards by the media before. That's actually not what they are.
Yeah.
They are uncrewed surface vehicles, which doesn't quite roll off the tongue, but that's what you'll hear me saying, USVs. And basically, they're autonomous vehicles that go out to collect ocean data, any variety of ocean data.
Wonderful. And do they exist in multiple shapes and sizes?
Actually, we have 3 different sizes. So the one you see behind us is a small, then there's a medium, and there's a large. We call them explorers, voyagers, and surveyors. And people have asked how big they are. So the explorers are 23 feet long, the voyagers are 33 feet long, and the surveyors are about 65 feet long.
Wow. And who exactly buys a saildrone? Do they get to keep a boat? How does that work?
They've certainly tried. They definitely ask about that. We are actually we do not sell the USVs. We are a data company. So we put different types of payloads, it's a fancy way of saying sensors, onto the USVs, and based on the type of sensors that you put on there, you collect different types of ocean data, and we sell only the data to our customers, not the USVs.
And based on the amount of data you're capturing, is that something that like I or a consumer would be able to access? Is that publicly available?
So a portion of it, yes. Obviously, we collect data for all sorts of different customers. We collect data for foundations and universities. We collect data for corporate partners. We collect data for some of the civil agencies and some for our Homeland Security and Defense partners. So obviously, if you're buying data for foundations or if you're buying data from NASA or NOAA, they do make that data publicly available. In fact, we worked for the National Weather Service for a while, and you can actually go into the National Weather Service database and see our data available there. It is used for research. I'm pleased to say that actually just earlier this month, a paper came out using data that we collected for a completely different mission for circumnavigating the Antarctic Ocean. And several years later, that data is being reused in a completely separate, independent party. So it does get used by the public quite a lot.
And talking about the Weather Service, one of the things I feel like we've all seen Saildrone in the press on is their interactions with hurricanes. How exactly does that work?
So I am pleased to say that we've sailed into hurricanes for multiple years on purpose. In fact, our insurance has a specific clause on it that says the damage is not covered if we knowingly sail into a named storm. Yeah, I've never had that at any of my companies. But I can say that we have sailed into hurricanes with the national, or on behalf of the NOAA, our customer. And we have sailed into Category 4 hurricanes, not once, but multiple times. We actually made it into the Guinness Book of World Records 2024. Wow. And a picture of the drones that sailed into the eye of the hurricane actually kept continuing to send out live data, pictures, even videos. And so you could see these 50-foot waves, 100 mile per hour winds, and the data keeps coming out. So we've got access to information that the world has never had access into of what actually happens inside of the eye of a Category 4 hurricane. That picture from that drone is sitting in the office of the NOAA administrator today.
And from just a behavioral perspective, as you're capturing all this information, I imagine it's more than just video.
Yes.
Are there other data points you guys are gathering that are better informing the Weather Service around, predictive, preventative, any measures like that?
Absolutely. So we are not the scientists, right? Our job is to collect this information on behalf of our customer. We collect a multitude of what are called essential climate variables. Everything from water temperature to skin temperatures. We are able to collect flux rates because we can collect data not just at the surface, but above and below. So we can collect wind speed. We can collect information about the waves and the frequency and the size of them. We can also collect data from underneath the surface of the water. So currents, speed, direction, water temperature. We have a winch that you have, which basically is a fancy way of saying a sensor that can drop, or a device that can drop a sensor, measure, you need it for sound velocity based on the temperature of the water if you're doing underwater mapping. So lots and lots of information. I would say that the information that is collected is not just about hurricanes and water temperatures, etc. We recently just discovered, just off the coast of California here, a completely undiscovered seamount that comes up to within 1,000 feet of the ocean surface. And we just discovered it while testing one of our drones out there. All sorts of interesting data that comes up.
And do they all have the same duration, like the time they can spend at sea?
They can, so because they're wind powered, they and explorers are completely wind and solar powered. They have no actual limitation of the amount of time you could spend at sea. These explorers have regularly spent, but once we send them multiple years in a row to do missions for the Tropical Pacific Observation System, TPOS, and our explorers have done over a year. Like they leave and they come back over 365 days later. Now, for the larger drones that operate some of the heavier payloads that I was talking about, those multi-beam sensors that you need in order to find the seamount and not just find it, but actually map it and characterize it and get everything that you need off of it, that takes a lot more energy and electricity. And so the drones can spend the time at sea, but the amount of time that the payloads work is generally limited to about 6 months that you could operate on mission.
But that's still a lot of time.
It's
especially compared to what the alternatives are.
Correct. Alternative technologies have advertised something up to 10 days in the space. Sometimes our customers tell us that could be up to half of that time. So that means you need crewed vessels that will actually take those alternative devices out to where the mission site is and drop them off. We don't do that. You could just deploy. We have a dock right here. Just deploy off the dock, deploy from land.
And the perks of Alameda. Right?
Another one of the perks of Alameda, actually, that is not a small point. That is one of the main reasons that we are here.
Yes, and I didn't just bring the sunshine today. It does shine here often.
It does shine here often, absolutely.
And so let's talk a little bit about customers. You guys have a really broad customer set, which isn't unusual when you look at frontier technologies that are looking at, industrial changes across category. How do you manage the unique needs of those disparate sets and create some sort of harmonious synergy?
So harmony is in the eye of the beholder, but I would say that the disparate sets of customers are not as disparate as you might think because everybody is looking for the same ocean data. I'll give you just a great example.
Okay, great.
Illegal fishing. It's actually called IUU, illegal, unregulated, and unreported fishing. So that is something that is hugely important, both to civic agencies as well as to law enforcement agencies. And so when you look at NOAA, one of our customers, they actually are the agency that supervises a variety of the different fisheries. And we've been doing, this is our 7th year doing a fisheries mission where you go through and you measure the amount of fish stock that is available so that you can properly set the quotas so overfishing doesn't happen. We do that information for the fisheries, but the law enforcement agencies want to make sure that unregulated fishing and overfishing does not take place. And so that's where the harmony that you were talking about actually comes through. The agencies have different mandates, but they all need that same data.
Yeah, they have different missions, you might say.
They have different missions.
What would you say is the Saildrone mission, aside from building phenomenally interesting looking boats that can live at sea for a year?
Saildrone's mission, and this is on the background of every screen that we have, is to sustainably explore, map, and understand the ocean.
So in honor of World Oceans Day, let's talk a little bit about what Saildrone's done to do its part on conservation. You recently published a carbon impact report really outlining this company's participation in what they call carbon accounting. To be honest, I wasn't as familiar with that. What exactly is carbon accounting?
Well, it's not covered by GAAP, I'll tell you that. And so just because I'm a CFO, it doesn't mean that's what ties it. But carbon accounting literally means counting or accounting for the amount of carbon that you produce, and in our case, also the amount of carbon that you avoid by using your technology.
And my understanding is that this was quite a heavy lift, that it took something like, two years for you to get done? Why exactly is that?
It did, in fact, take us a significant amount of time. And the reason is because, as far as we know, we are the first people or the first company in the autonomous maritime or in the maritime industry to actually try and take both sides of that carbon equation. So measuring what your carbon footprint is something that's been fairly standard for a number of years now, certainly over a decade, and is becoming increasingly more popular, more standardized. There are more companies that are able to do that. Measuring the amount of carbon that you avoid is brand new. The guidance for doing that just came out last March from the World Business Council on Sustainable Development. And it's taken quite a lot of effort to try and put that guidance into practice.
Sure. And what have been going through that exercise? What were some of the learnings you had? Either things that you would repeat in terms of business performance or things you might share with others thinking about embarking on tackling some of these programs?
So it's sort of a really big question.
Yeah. Maybe just give me like three.
Yes. So I'd say the first thing is just our business learning. So this is absolutely worthwhile in terms of an effort to do, because what we learned was, number one, our technology, our USVs, actually avoid 99.9% of the carbon that is emitted by comparable ships trying to do similar types of missions.
Yeah.
That's amazing. We knew we were carbon efficient. We didn't know we were 99.9% carbon efficient, and that's huge. The second piece of learning is that if you take not just the operational component of what we do, but everything else you see around you, our warehouse, the production floor, our shipping, employee commuting, the finance function, everything that you could throw in and look at the entire amount that we produce of carbon, our entire carbon footprint, compared to the carbon that we avoid, for every ton of carbon that is produced with our operations, we avoid almost 1.5 tons of carbon.
Wow.
So net, we are, well, this is a really good question. What are we? The guidance does not allow you to net one against the other. So I'm not allowed to call myself carbon neutral. And you don't want to call yourself carbon negative. I'm not a marketing person, but calling yourself carbon negative is probably not the right thing. Sure. Are you climate positive? I don't know what to call it, but the more of that impact we have, the better impact we will have on climate just in general. And we'd love to be able to understand how to talk about that.
Sure. Is that why you published your report? Because sometimes companies do these studies and they keep it mostly for private records, but I think you guys made a very bold statement of putting your results out there and sort of letting your work speak for itself.
It's a good question. I think we published the report because it's part of who we are. It's true to our mission. Part of our mission is to safely and sustainably explore and understand the oceans, and this is part of that mission. But I think a bigger component is the fact that carbon accounting it's actually quite important for all companies, whether it's part of your mission or not. The SEC just came out with guidance about carbon reporting. California, where we're located, just came out with that guidance for private companies. The European Union, where we hope to do a lot of business, requires carbon accounting and carbon reporting for all companies. If you want to win business with the UK Hydrographic Office, it's actually a requirement. And I think this is something that's important not just for maritime companies. If you're a solar company, if you're a company that's focusing on alternative foods, for example, if you're a company that's looking at sustainable, any type of low-carbon cement, any type of company that is interested in carbon-friendly technologies, way outside of the maritime environment, this is really important for. People think you have to be a climate company to do this. That's not the case.
Yeah, that was actually going to be my next question, which was, what do you think are some of the misconceptions or even some barriers to entry for individuals or companies of just engaging in this dialogue?
So I think a big barrier to entry is just trying to understand how to do some of this and what resources you need to bring to bear on this. We had to go out and find 2 different consulting companies, one to be able to help us with the carbon footprint, one to do the carbon avoidance. And I actually went out to several of our investors who convened talking groups about this. And this was so new that the investors didn't have existing references to give me. So if any of your audience want to understand how I went about that process, who are some of the companies, I would absolutely recommend the companies that we ended up using. Please feel free to, direct them my way, and I'll be happy to talk to them about it. Another barrier, though, is when you're doing something for the first time, especially in the carbon avoidance. I don't want to get too much into the weeds. The report talks about all of this, but you actually have to define use cases for each one of the ways in which you would use your technology. And then you have to calculate how much carbon would have been provided or would have been used by comparable ships that are actually doing that same mission. That takes a lot of thinking, and that requires involving a lot of other people in your company. So we've had people from our operations team, our program delivery team, our product management team, really try to help us understand how would you do this if you didn't have a Saildrone available to do this, and then calculate and then audit the actual reports that came up from the consultants mission by mission by mission. That's part of what took so long. I mean, it took many, many, many hours by a lot of different people, both internally and externally. But I would say, number one, it was a worthwhile effort for us, and we are currently working on our 2023 report, and that's not going to take 2 years. In fact, we think the 2023 report is going to come out within 6 months. I can't wait to have this conversation.
Yes, again, we'll see what we learn.
We'll see what we learn. But it actually is so fascinating to see the internal stakeholders that we have that were involved with the process last year. Number one, how much faster it's going around this time. But number two, how engaged they are in understanding the differences between last year's numbers and this year's numbers. You really see how the difference in the business is reflected in the difference in the carbon emissions and the carbon avoidance.
Yeah, I can see that. Well, that's actually really helpful, because one of the things we talk about, you and I, of course, is just the sense that you have to be a climate company or a sustainability company to get engaged or involve yourself with this, that it's one or the other. And I think what you're saying, one, is that you don't have to be. And two, that with each company that goes through this process, that there should be a culture of shared learnings so that you're paving the road for the next year for yourself, but also for all the future companies that are going to follow suit.
Absolutely. I think this is not something that's done by one company. I wish every company did this. I wish all the companies in the maritime environment and autonomous maritime help, so that we can actually understand the impact that we are having on the oceans, but on climate more generally. This is not a maritime issue. This is a global community that involves all commercial companies.
Yeah. Well, let's switch gears to something a bit more fun, something a bit more in my wheelhouse. So let's talk about people. I would imagine that most of the people who work at Saildrone hadn't previously worked in an unmanned autonomous
surface
vessel.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, or vehicle of any sort. And so what I would say is, how would you characterize the kind of people or the kind of experiences that lend themselves to being successful at a business like this, that's doing something new, creating something new every day?
I think that's exactly the kind of mindset that you need. We are creating a paradigm shift in ocean data collection, and I know that paradigm shift is a term that it just makes you groan. It's been used over and over again, but you think about it, right? You think how Netflix was able to make a paradigm shift for the TV watching. Uber was able to make a paradigm shift for the taxi industry. SpaceX was able to make a paradigm shift for how we think about space travel and communications. Saildrone is doing the same thing around maritime operations, things that previously we just imagined that you have to do them with a human on board in order to be able to switch some toggles. And all of a sudden, you're able to control these drones from your cell phone or from your laptop, from home, from the office, from other locations. It's really, when I say a paradigm shift, it really is a complete change in the way that things have been done. And people who have that mindset are the people that we're looking for. It's hard to be a category creator. It's hard to convince people that the category is real and that it's the future. It can be tiring. You don't have an unlimited amount of budget behind you, right?
Yeah.
And people who are willing to create the future and be on, you call it frontier technology company, that's exactly what it is. It's being on the frontier, creating the future. It's hard. it's messy. It's not necessarily, a complete straight line. There's some experimentation that goes on as you're trying to figure out your, market product fit and what exactly are the sensors that make the best sense for our customers. Those are the kind of people that we're looking to join the team. If you've got that mindset, go to saildrone.com/careers and get in touch with us.
And what about things where you look at the future, where you think about the innovations that are happening more broadly speaking, whether it's around artificial intelligence or even some of the global connectivity things? Do you see that Saildrone is going to have sort of a forward-looking posture in any of those things?
We do have that posture today. So people look at the drones behind us and they see this beautiful hardware environment that's behind us. And trust me, an unbelievable amount of time and effort has gone into the hardware engineering. We have software engineers who work with us. In fact, half the company is engineering that work on everything from actually operating the drones to capturing the data. So I would tell you that getting that data to connect and to be provided over satellite in real time into our hosted cloud environment and then visualized and cleansed and data checked is a significant amount of work. Then there's a huge amount of effort that goes into how do you communicate that? How do you provide that data to the customer in the way that's actionable to them? That kind of innovation is amazing. Then you take it into the next level. People are talking about, well, what does nighttime vision look like? People want to know, what about acoustic devices, right? And so we actually just undertook a project for Now RDC and one of our partners to be able to characterize whale sounds, dolphin sounds. We are working on bats, for example. So things that you didn't expect to happen that really are in the forefront are happening today.
Interesting. So what you're saying is like, A, kind of like an iceberg, there's a lot going on underneath the surface, and B, that it's a mindset choice.
It is.
Participating in something like that.
And I would say it's not just in engineering, right? I run G&A functions, and I would tell you that even in our finance function, we had to get so revolutionary with what we were doing with our ERP system that actually the ERP company, it's one of the big ones that you've heard about that many of your customers use, asked if they could feature us as one of their sort of 12 featured companies for the year. Pretty interesting and exciting ways of thinking about capabilities that they, who are the leaders in the space, don't have included in their technology.
Yeah. Well, this has been incredibly informative. Thank you for making the time. And I hope to see one of these bad boys out on the sea sometime soon.
I hope, first of all, come back and visit anytime. And second of all, it's great to have you here.
Thanks so much.